Welcome to all primary 4 students in the second lesson of energy and collision concept. In our previous lesson, we wondered about what happened to objects during collision, and we started to explore the cause and effect relation between collision and energy transfer. ابتدينا كنا نفكر إيه العلاقة ما بين انتقال الطاقة والتصادم. Or what happens as energy changes, like the kinetic energy that the cricket bat has that transferred into the ball when it hit it, causing also change in its speed and direction. Or like the kinetic energy a wrecking ball has which is transferred to the building and affected. فاكرين المرة اللي فاتت اتكلمنا عن نوعين من التصادم. أول نوع اتكلمنا عنه الكريكت بات مع البول، كانوا التو اوبجكتس بيتحركوا وحصل هنا انتقال الطاقة. تاني مرة اتكلمنا على الريكينج بول. الريكينج بول كانت بتخبط في بيلدينج واقف ثابت ستيبل اوبجكت، وكانت هتنقل جزء من طاقتها للستيبل اوبجكت عشان كده كان هيقع. We also put some expectations of the different factors we need to think of when studying collision, such as object speed and its mass, and the amount of kinetic energy it has. And we realized that the information and evidences we collect are very important to think about safety features which protect the drivers during a collision, like the seat belt that is able to prevent the driver from moving forward and colliding into the body of the car, and the airbag which can be opened automatically whenever it detects a collision. بعد ما اتكلمنا عن examples للتصادم، اتكلمنا عن safety measures موجودة في العربية، زي السيت بيلت اللي بيمنع ان احنا نتحرك لقدام ونتخبط في الفريم اوف ذا كار، وكمان اتكلمنا على الاير باجز اللي اول ما هتحس بتصادم هتتنفخ عشان تحمينا. Today in the fourth activity, analyze like a scientist, we will continue analyzing different situations of collision. الاكتيفيتي اللي هنتكلم عنها analyze like a scientist، هنبتدي نتكلم على examples مختلفة كمان للتصادم. We will start with simple one that may happen in our daily life, like when you bump into someone while you are running or accidentally hit something so it falls down. This will help us later in understanding the real-world collision and the damages they might cause. So please open your book page 218 and read the text carefully and try to underline and analyze the information and key ideas in the text about what happened to objects during a collision. Try also to think of all what you have learned about energy transformation. Let's start reading. Collision, as we explained, is the result of two objects hitting one another. Collision اللي هو التصادم، يبقى عندي two objects هيخبطوا في بعض. And it could happen to a large number of objects, not just two. ممكن يحصل لعدد أكبر كمان من الobjects. When that happens, it causes energy transfer between objects. بيحصل دايما انتقال الطاقة، زي ما اتكلمنا على الكريكت بات هتنقل ازاي طاقة للبول عشان البول تتحرك في opposite direction. The text highlights one of the simple collision situations that could have happened to all of us. Let's try to draw it and explain what have happened to the object's energy before and after collision. Try to focus because that's your next task. Let me draw it for you. First, let me divide the board into two parts, one before the collision and the second after the collision. So here we will talk before collision، وهنا نحاول نعبر عن after collision. When you run in the street, that means you are moving object and you have kinetic energy. طبيعي وانا بجري هبقى بتحرك، يعني عندي طاقة حركة kinetic energy, which is great because you are running not walking. طب if there is a sign which is standing still, يعني if I'm running in this case, okay, and I have a sign that's in here, الساين دي بتتحرك ولا واقفة؟ زي إشارات المرور اللي بتقولي stop أو هنا waiting، ما بتتحركش. it stands still. what will happen when I bump in it؟ لو أنا خبطت في الساين هيحصل إيه؟ أول حاجة لو أنا خبطت في الساين في probabilities كتيرة جدا ممكن تحصل. what will happen؟ maybe you might stop moving or bounce and fall or the sign itself might wobble and rattle. ممكن الساين نفسها تتهز وتعمل صوت. طيب يبقى تاني لو أنا خبطت في الساين عندي احتمالات كتير، أهمهم إن أنا هقف. أوكي؟ ممكن أقف وبعدين أقع. ولو أنا كنت بتحرك بسرعة كبيرة كمان الساين هتبتدي تعمل wobbling and rattling. This means that you transferred your kinetic energy to the sign. هو أنا بتحرك عندي kinetic energy، لما هتروح للساين هتبتدي الساين دي كمان تتحرك. You stopped moving, which means you no longer have kinetic energy, but you have potential energy. لما هتقف خلاص كده ما عندكش kinetic energy, but you have potential energy stored in your body. Also, while bouncing, you had kinetic energy. لو كنت وقعت كان هيبقى عندك وقتها kinetic energy. Think about the same situation and what will happen if you hit the sign while you were walking. تخيل ان نفس الموقف ده حصل بس المرة دي انت كنت بتتمشى. Is still there a chance of moving the sign back and forth or not؟ لو انا كنت ماشي وخبطت في الساين برضو هتتحرك قدام ورا كده؟ ما اظنش. Walking means you have low speed, meaning that your kinetic energy is low. So when you hit the sign, you will not have that great impact on it. Imagine that while you are walking in the same street, you hit an empty plastic bottle. طب لو أنا بقى كنت بتمشى بس خبطت مش في الساين، خبطت في بلاستيك بوتل فاضية. Will it move؟ It's really easy to move it, right? Then why the probability that the sign move was lower؟ ليه احنا قلنا ان الساين غالبا مش هتتحرك لو انا كنت ماشي لكن البوتل اتحركت؟ Because the plastic bottle is so tiny and has a small mass. It means it's light. And that's why it was easy to move. You can imagine any situation you have experienced or seen around you and draw two simple pictures of before and after collision as we did now. عايزاكم تفكروا في مواقف حصلت لكم في حياتكم، أكيد بيحصل تصادمات كتير جدا، وترسموا صورة before and after. Do it as a caricature كده، خلوها in a funny way. Let's continue. Of course, you have found a lot of situations you can describe. What you see on the screen right now is a collection of my students' drawings. The first drawing shows a man riding a bike on a slope. Then he hit another man carrying boxes made out of paper. And the second one shows a child sliding over a slide who then hits another child standing at the end of the slide. The third one shows a boy who kicked the ball in a forceful way that it hits a vase on the table. What is the common thing in these three pictures before the collision occurs? خدتوا بالكم ايه وجه التشابه ما بين الثلاث صور؟ The bike moving down the slope, the boy sliding moving down, and the ball flying in the air. All of them were moving at a high speed, higher than the object they hit. سرعتهم كانت أكبر من الحاجة اللي هيخبطوا فيها. That means they have large amount of kinetic energy. Speed and energy are two of the important factors a scientist consider when analyzing any collision accident. So that's why we will analyze the effect of speed and energy in activity number 5, Analyze like a scientist. Before we start, I want you to take a closer look to the material that I got here. تعالوا كده نشوف الماتيريال اللي أنا جبتها هتفكركم بإيه. فاكرين الماتيريال دي؟ toy car, cardboard tube, paper cup, scissors, ruler, sticky tape, stopwatch، وكان عندي كمان books. Do you remember these tools? These are the tools we used in our hands-on activity, racing downhill, from the concept of speed. الكونسبت اللي فات كنا عملنا activity بالتولز دي. Of course, you remember what was the aim of our colleagues in the investigation. Let's see. In this activity, we examined the effect of inclined slope on the speed and the energy of moving objects. اتكلمنا عن العلاقة ما بين الانكلاين، السبيد والmoving object، الانرجي بتاعت الموفينج object. And during the investigation, we were using number of books. وكمان قلت لكم ان احنا هنا هنستخدم blocks to increase or decrease the inclination، عشان نعلي ونقلل الانكلاين. We were measuring two things when we put the car to move downward the slope through the tube. قسنا حاجتين. أول حاجة جربنا إن احنا نخلي العربية تنزل من التيوب، okay, and reaching the other time, the other end, and we calculated the time it takes, okay? So the first thing we measured is the time it takes to reach the end. And the second thing is how far it pushed the plastic cup. بعد ما جربنا نقيس الوقت، ابتدينا نحط هنا الكب ونقيس كمان هتخبط الكب وتخليها تتحرك قد ايه. We recorded our explanation in the table on page 201. And what I'm holding here now is a similar table that one of my friends recorded their answers in it. These results represent a specific pattern, and what we are going to do is to read the text of impact of speed on collision on page 220 and 221 and try to highlight the information and the evidence which supported the pattern shown by the results. تعالوا كده نلزق التيبل ده على البورد ونبتدي نexplain كان ايه اللي بيحصل اصلا. Okay, we agreed that the pattern is something which is repeated in a certain way that can be observed. فاكرين لما اتكلمنا على الباترن اصلا في theme 1 اتكلمنا على الفايرفلايز، كان حاجه بتتكرر. If you look at the data found in the first column on the number of books, you will observe that whenever the incline increase, the time decreases. كل ما البوكس كانت بتزيد كل ما الوقت كان بيقل. When a car takes less time to move from a place to another, what does this mean? Exactly, it means that the car has a high speed. We agreed on the more the speed increases, the more kinetic energy increases. So the fastest car recorded less time was able to move the cup for a greater distance during collision. عايزاكم تلاحظوا تاني الباترن اللي كان موجود هنا. الباترن اللي كان موجود كل ما بنزود عدد البوكس يعني الانكلاين بيزيد، ايه اللي هيحصل؟ هيبقى عندنا less time. معنى ان انا اخدت وقت اقل ان كده الاوبجكت ده كان فاست. طب الاوبجكت الفاست ده عنده ايه؟ عنده greater kinetic energy. طب اتاكد ازاي ان الكايناتيك انرجي دي كانت كبيره؟ اتاكد بان انا اشوفه حرك الكوبايه قد ايه. Yes, it moved the cup for longer distance, which means that it has a great kinetic energy which is transferred to the cup and moved it. So we can conclude that the pattern which showed by the results states that the more the incline increases, time will decrease and the speed and the kinetic energy of the object increases and vice versa. ركزوا تاني، كل ما الانكلاين زاد كل ما الوقت هيقل، يبقى السبيد زادت والكايناتيك انرجي كمان زادت. When the inclined slope decreases هيحصل ايه؟ The time increases. كل ما السلوب هيقل كل ما التايم هيزيد. And the speed and the kinetic energy of the object will decrease. هتبقى الكايناتيك انرجي قليلة جدا. Now you have to read the text on page 220 and 221. Let me open it for you. I want you to underline the evidence that supports the pattern of the results. ما تنسوش تاني الباترن بيربط ما بين الانكلاين، speed, kinetic energy. عايزاكم underline أي دليل على ده. The first sentence in the text was the first which I highlighted, We will read it together and I need you to highlight it with me. The amount of kinetic energy an object has depend upon its speed. Kinetic energy مرتبطة بالspeed. The faster an object travel, the more energy it has. When a speeding object hits another object, it transfers some of its energy to it. The faster the object, the more energy it transfers. كل ما الأوبجكت كان سريع هيبقى عنده kinetic energy كبيرة، فهينقل جزء كبير من الطاقة دي للحاجة اللي هيخبطها، فأكيد هيعمل damage. Now we have clear evidence to prove that whenever the speed increases, the kinetic energy increases, and when it collides with another object, it will be able to transfer a great amount of its kinetic energy. So, if we look at the results of the fastest cars, we will find they are the cars that could move the plastic cup for a greater distance because they transferred great part from their kinetic energy, unlike the slowest one. If we apply the same ideas on the car which move fast on the road, we will find that whenever the car moves with a high speed, it will be able to transfer a great amount of its kinetic energy to the object that it crashes into, and it will cause more damage. تعالوا أفكركم احنا عملنا ايه عشان نتأكد من ده. فاكرين لما اتكلمنا على الكار كوليجنز؟ ابتدينا نقارن حالتين. أول حالة لما كان الكوليجن بيحصل فاست، وتاني مرة لما الكوليجن كان بيحصل with a high speed. افتكرنا ان احنا لو خبطنا العربيتين بالراحة هيعملوا less damage. طب لو خبطناهم جامد هيحصل ايه؟ They will make more damage or effect. A transfer of energy will appear in different forms, like مثلا sound energy, which you will hear in the collision sound. أكيد أخدتوا بالكم فرق في الصوت. بالراحة كان الصوت واطي قوي، ممكن تكونوا ما سمعتوهوش، لكن لما عملناهم بهاي سبيد أو بفورسة عالية ابتدى الصوت يوضح شوية. Maybe it will appear in a form of thermal energy generated from the friction between the colliding objects. أكيد التو objects دول لما هيخبطوا في بعض كده هيحصل إيه؟ هيحصل ما بينهم friction. friction يعني احتكاك. ولو انتوا فاكرين كنا اتكلمنا على الفريكشن فورس وقلنا انها السبب الاساسي slowing down and stopping objects. Try to guess what will happen if two speeding cars traveling opposing each other in direction collided. زي ما احنا قلنا دلوقتي بالظبط، ايه اللي هيحصل؟ Do you remember in the investigative phenomena when we asked ourselves why the ball changed its speed and direction when the player hit it with the bat؟ فاكرين في الكريكت ايه اللي حصل للكورة؟ The same idea. Two objects moving with high speed and have high kinetic energy opposing each other in direction, the increase of the speed will increase the amount of energy transferred between objects, which means that the sound of collision will be so great and the generated thermal energy will be greater. Each object can push the other one for a distance, and the damage may be severe for both of them and will be almost in the front of the car. أكيد لما هيخبطوا بعض هيعملوا صوت وهيحصل دامج. طبعا على حسب سرعتهم كل ما الصوت هيتغير والدامج هيتغير، وأكيد مكان الاصطدام هو ده المكان اللي هيحصل فيه مشكلة. Of course the damage may differ in a specific situation. Do you remember the train and the car؟ تعالوا كده نفكر إيه اللي هيحصل لو عربية خبطت في تراك. أول فرق لازم تلاحظوه في الماس different masses، دي light ودي heavy. أوكي؟ طيب if the car hit an object with a bigger mass زي التراك أو زي الترين، مين فيهم هيحصل له more damage؟ I think the car. Okay? So the mass is different and that's why we will try to investigate in the next lessons إيه هيبقى الفرق في الإفكت في الكار والترين. Finally, we have finished our lesson. Let's review the most important points we learned today. In today's lesson, we explained some real situations by showing before and after the collision and the main transfer of the kinetic energy between objects. بعد كده, we analyzed some information about the relation between Object speed, the amount of energy which can be transferred during collision. يعني تاني مرة اتكلمنا عن السرعة بتاعة الأوبجكتس، سرعتي كانت بالراحة ولا بسرعة جدا، أوكي؟ وعلاقتها بالإنكلاين وبكمية الإنرجي اللي موجودة. Today also we have read the scientific term of the collision, which means the result of two objects hitting one another. Let's put it on the key vocabulary wall. I want you to create an ID card for collision term. فاكرين ال ID card ده كنا بنعمل فيه ايه؟ You get a card, write the word that you want to explain in the front side and its meaning below it or at the back. Then on the other side you can also draw a simple picture explaining it. For now, study well and see you next time. Thank you.